So this year we have the Moto G4 Play, the Moto G4, and the Moto G4 Plus, and this is the G4 Plus. The 4 is to tell us that this is the 4th generation Moto G, and the Plus is to let us know that this is the highest end model with the best specs and the most features. From a design standpoint, it's very reminiscent of previous Moto Gs. There are a few minor aesthetic differences, but for the most part, it's sort of the same look and feel that we've typically come to expect from a Moto-made device. It's an all-plastic build like it's always been, and while the faux metallic frame may lead you to think otherwise, do not be fooled, it is indeed entirely made of plastic. The G4 Plus definitely doesn't feel as nice as a phone made of metal or glass, but for a phone made of plastic, it's one of the more sturdier feeling phones out there, and this is something that Moto's always been really pretty good with. It doesn't rattle, creak, or feel hollow, and it just feels like a very solid phone. The back features that signature Motorola dimple that we all know and love, and it has a nice texture to it which helps a lot with the grip, but the frame is a smooth finish, so it still feels just a tad bit slippery. The back is also removable, and underneath that removable back cover is a micro SD card slot and a SIM card slot, or dual SIM card slots depending on which version of the Moto G4 Plus that you're using. Despite the back being removable, the battery, however, is not. That is completely sealed in, so there's no swapping batteries here. The sides of the phone have been kept pretty minimal with the headphone jack up top, micro USB port on the bottom, power and volume keys on the right, and the left side has been left completely clean of any buttons or ports. The power button has a ridged texture to it to make it easy to differentiate from the volume rockers, but I actually feel like it's a little bit too high up on the chassis, and the position of the power and volume keys really should be the other way around. On top of that, the buttons aren't very clicky or tactile, and sometimes it's hard to tell if you're actually even pressing them because of how mushy they feel. If you're wondering where the speaker is, it's actually the earpiece. So this phone does have a front-facing speaker, but you're not getting stereo sound here since it's only one speaker. It does sound pretty good though, and is capable of getting decently loud without sounding tinny or distorted. Also on the front that's specific to the G4 Plus is a fingerprint sensor, but unlike most front-facing fingerprint sensors, this one does not double as a home button. It's not a deal breaker that it doesn't work as a home button, but I kind of wish that it did because I found myself trying to use it like one, and most people that get this phone will probably end up doing the same. I know this may sound nitpicky, but I don't think it's the most attractive looking fingerprint sensor. I think the square shape really clashes with the rounded and curved design of the G4 Plus, but as a fingerprint sensor, it works extremely well. It's fast, it's accurate, the setup process is pretty quick, so it works about as well as many other fingerprint sensors on the market. There's still no NFC, which is unfortunate, which means you can't do things like tap your phone to connect to a Bluetooth speaker, transfer content, or use a mobile payment platform like Android Pay. Another thing to note about these new Moto Gs is that they aren't water resistant anymore. They can still survive a simple splash or a sprinkle in the rain, but since they no longer carry that IP certification, don't go dunking these things in water. The G4 Plus is a little bit thinner than previous Moto Gs, but it's grown quite a bit in every other dimension, mostly thanks to that larger display. Not only is it larger, but it's also higher resolution, which I think the Moto G line desperately needed. It's a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS LCD, and the increase in size and resolution makes games, web browsing, and YouTube videos much more enjoyable. It's not the best 1080p screen that I've ever seen on a smartphone, but it does the job just fine. It looks sharp, viewing angles are pretty good, and the colors are just the right amount of vibrancy that it doesn't look washed out. As far as the specs go, this is going to vary slightly depending on which storage options you pick. The 16GB model comes with 2 gigs of RAM, and it effectively goes up from there with 3 gigs on the 32GB version and 4 gigs on the 64GB version, but they all run on the same Snapdragon 617 processor. The model that I've been testing is the 32GB version, so I can't really comment on the other two models, but I haven't ran into any performance issues at all. It's not exactly a benchmarking beast, but it's been very fast and responsive. Apps launch quickly, games run smoothly, and is capable of multitasking without much of a hitch. You can thank the software for a lot of this. Motorola's been doing a really good job of keeping things as close to stock as possible, and the Moto G4 Plus is no exception. It's running plain Jane Android Marshmallow, and there's virtually no bloatware to slow things down. It doesn't come with all of Motorola's features that you would find on something like the Moto X, but you do get most of them. You've got Moto Actions, which lets you do things like turn on the flashlight with a chopping motion, flipping the phone over to silence notifications, or launching the camera with the twist of your wrist. Motorola's ambient display feature is also still here, but on the G4 Plus, it's completely contingent on motion. There's no sensors on the front, so you can't wave your hand over it to wake it, and it also doesn't continuously pulsate when you have a notification. The only time it lights up is when you pull your phone out of your pocket or off of a table, or when you initially receive the notification. Aside from the few Motorola features, there's really not much else to it. It's a simple and clean stock Android experience, and sometimes that's all you really need. The G4 Plus is packing a 3000 mAh battery inside, which is becoming a fairly standard size in a lot of smartphones these days, and when you pair that with a 1080p display and stock Android, it sounds like a recipe for good battery life, and the battery life on the G4 Plus is pretty good. It gets me through a full day with regular usage like checking Twitter, Facebook, texting, and browsing the web without much of an issue. It's only on days where I hammer on it with several hours of gaming and picture taking that it won't make it, but it's got fast charging, so it's pretty easy to get some juice back into it in a short amount of time. The camera on the G4 Plus is a new and improved 16 megapixel f2.0 aperture lens with both phase detection and laser autofocus, but there's no optical image stabilization here. The camera app has also been improved. There's actually a shutter button now, making it easier to take photos with one hand, and the app itself is generally pretty clean and simple. Swiping in from the left opens up a menu for basic camera settings, and the button in the upper right lets you switch between photo, video, and a few other basic modes like panorama and slow motion video. The most notable change in Motorola's new camera app is we finally have a manual mode now for controlling white balance, ISO, shutter speed, and focus, and this was something that was definitely long overdue. Picture quality is surprisingly really good. It's not going to stack up to the Samsungs and LGs of the world, but for such an inexpensive smartphone, the camera is capable of taking some very nice looking shots. In good lighting, you can capture plenty of detail with vibrant colors, and the images are sharp without looking over sharpened. For close-up shots, you can also get some pretty good looking depth of field. It doesn't have the best dynamic range as it tends to crust the shadows a little too much, but HDR can solve that problem pretty quickly. It tones down the shadows and highlights and adds some extra vibrancy without making the shots look unnatural or fake. It's only in low light where this camera falls apart extremely quickly. We sort of expect shots to always show some noise in low light, but there's a significant amount of it on the G4 Plus. Highlights are also typically overexposed, there's not a whole lot of detail to be had, and it also has trouble focusing in low light. If you're looking for a great low light camera, the G4 Plus is not going to do it for you, but in most situations it gets the job done. The front-facing camera can take some pretty decent shots as well. It's a 5 megapixel wide-angle lens, so it's nothing too crazy, but it's more than adequate for all your selfie-taking needs. If the standard black and white color options don't quite do it for you, the G4 Plus will be available on Moto Maker for you to customize to your heart's content with different colored backplates, accent colors, and engravings to truly make it your own. Now, as far as how much all of this is going to cost, Motorola hasn't provided exact pricing or availability for the US just yet, but if the pricing in India is any indication, you can probably expect the G4 Plus to be anywhere between $200 to $250. If it does end up costing that much, that's actually a pretty good deal. It's a big enough of a price difference from phones like the Nexus 5X and the OnePlus 3 to make it worth considering, especially if you're looking for a smartphone that offers some nice specs and features while staying below that $300 price tag. The Moto G has always been one of the best bang for your buck smartphones on the market, but it was sorely in need of some upgrades, and the G4 Plus makes all the right changes to make it a compelling option in 2016. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully you all enjoyed this review of the Moto G4 Plus. Let us know down in the comments below, what do you guys think of the Moto G4 Plus or the new Moto G line in general? And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. We definitely appreciate it. And also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on our future videos. And check us out on social media as well. Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Google+, all that good stuff. Links to those will also be down below. And also feel free to follow me on Twitter as well. Check out the website, AndroidAuthority.com, for more in-depth coverage, because we are your source for all things Android.
When you told me that you hated my friends, the only problem was with you and not them. And every time you told me my opinion was wrong, try to make me